Hi, mine's Peter Willis and I've been a member of the British Model Flying Association's Achievement Scheme Review Committee for several years now. Throughout recent years, the committee have been trying to make the Achievement Scheme tests relevant to modern aero modelling advances and changing regulation, as well as making them as straightforward as possible for you to embark upon setting yourself the challenge to improve your knowledge and competence, and then to be able to clearly demonstrate that you've achieved it. As well as producing this new RC flying training booklet, Flying Start, a few years ago, the committee produced a guidance video for examiners on the then current stabilisation technologies involved in multi-rotor models. And this was very well received. Since then, we've had numerous requests to produce guidance videos for both fixed-wing and helicopter tests. If you are thinking of taking an Achievement Scheme test, I hope that this introductory video will provide a good basic guide on where to start that journey and what you will need to do to prepare for taking one of the many BMFA Ready Control Achievement tests available. We will be producing follow-on videos over the coming years for the specific flying test you may wish to prepare for and take, which, if you've been inspired, will hopefully be in the near future. The current scheme is purely voluntary and sets you some challenges around safety and legal knowledge, as well as flying ability in a variety of circumstances. The scheme is run entirely by volunteer instructors and examiners who will work hard to help you achieve that goal. Now, it's important to remember that the passing of the test is a personal achievement and not a licence to fly. However, many event organisers do see the competencies demonstrated to pass a BMFA achievement test as a good indication of your ability to be a safe, competent and responsible model aircraft flyer. So what's the starting point? Well, all of the guidance documents for the various Achievement Scheme tests can be found on the BMFA Achievement Scheme website. You can also get to the AS website by clicking on the Info tab on the main BMFA site and then clicking Ready Control Achievement Scheme. Once you're on the Achievement Scheme website, you can click on the Test tab or the Downloads tab to find the various guidance documents for the specific tests. Before you even embark on any flying preparation for a test, this information is essential reading, as are all of the sections in the BMFA Members Handbook that refer to the safe, legal and responsible operation of model aircraft. These are covered in sections 8 through to 24 of the Members Handbook. The Battery Safety Booklet is also a useful read, and if planning on taking a gas turbine C test or using a gas turbine model for any other test, then the Code of Practice for the Safe Operation of Gas Turbine Powered Aircraft. The BMFA Members Handbook will also make reference to current civil aviation publications, such as CAP 658, that apply to model aircraft operation. It is this document which many of the mandatory questions used in the Achievement Scheme tests are based on. Whilst there is quite a bit of information to take in, especially the legislation and the safety guidance, you will not be expected to be word perfect during your test. What Achievement Scheme examiners are looking for when asking you questions is that you're aware of your legal responsibility and obligations and can demonstrate a general understanding of these, as well as showing that you can competently apply them throughout the entirety of your test. A list of the possible mandatory legal questions and sample answers are included at the back of each booklet. One important thing to remember is that the guidance material is reviewed annually and usually posted on the website in December for going live on the 1st of January each year. Unless there are significant changes to legislation or safety guidance as a result of an investigation, then this guidance will not change until the review each year. Any changes from last year's guidance will have a solid bar down the left-hand side of the text or diagram to indicate what has changed. Any change of regulation relating to the operation of small unmanned aircraft, the term now used by the CAA to describe our models, will be notified on the BMFA main website news area or, of course, the CAA website. So keep your eye out for any proposed or imminent changes to regulation. Most of the safety guidance is really only common sense stuff, but it's important to know and remember it. If you've gone through a training scheme at your local club, much of this should have already been discussed during your training, And an examiner will also ask you questions about your own club rules, particularly those relating to safety and no-fly zones. I met up with Duncan McClure a few weeks ago to ask him about some of this, so let's see what he had to say.
Just arrived at the site, and obviously you're new to this site, so what's one of the things that you need to have learnt from the manual or the BMFA handbook that an examiner could be asking you as a candidate?
The most important one from the manual, from the BMFA handbook, is the sweeps check. So it's sun, wind, eventualities, emergencies, and transmitter and site controls. So the site controls is really the local rules.
People get a bit confused between the emergencies and eventualities. What do they really?
Okay, well they are both very similar, and it's really just thinking ahead a little bit. So before you actually start flying, thinking, okay, so a good example of an eventuality is say I'm flying and we have incursion in our airspace of a light aircraft, say for example. So what action am I going to take? You know, which is the safe parts of the field and the site to fly low, perhaps. You know, am I going to land immediately, or that might not be the most safe thing to do, or whatever.
Yeah,
so
particularly so with sites that might have public footpaths along the edge of them.
Absolutely, like yeah. You could have people walking by or whatever. So it's really thinking ahead, and the same with emergencies. You know, what am I going to do if I have, let's say I have a mid-air and the model's still flyable but something's come off it. You know, where am I going to put it down? Where am I going to land safely so that I don't endanger my fellow flyers?
Yeah, a little bit of risk assessment before the flight rather than during the flight.
Absolutely, yeah, it's a prior risk assessment, if you like.
Duncan, one of the things that a lot of people are concerned about is the mandatory questions when they finish their flying test. Should they be worried?
No, absolutely not, Peter. I mean, several important things about the mandatory questions. First of all, and I think this is of primary importance, is the fact that they're not actually new. No. They're all questions an examiner could have asked over the last 10 years or so. So all we've done by making them mandatory is really try and raise awareness, because they're based on the legal framework that underpins our model flying activities. So it's very important that people have a good understanding of what's involved.
Okay, and of course the questions and the sample answers are available on the Achievement Scheme website for anybody to look up and
absolutely
know exactly what's involved.
Yes, we've not only published the questions, we've also published the model answers. The reason that the questions are worded the way they are is, to a certain extent, they speak CAA language, because it's very important for us to be demonstrating to the CAA that we're taking a responsible attitude towards our model flying operations, especially in these times when there's more scrutiny on the sport than there has been in the past. But you're right, and the mandatory questions are I don't say everywhere. They're in the various guidance documents that we produce. I've got the fixed wing, the helicopter, and the multi-rotor guidance documents here. These are the ones that guide you through all the tests. These were all the guidance that we had before we had the videos that we're now producing. So the videos are based on this guidance, but each of these guidance documents that details the A and B tests for all these different disciplines, they all have the mandatory questions printed in the back, and as you say, they're on the website. So we've done our best to get the information out there, basically.
Okay, there's two other areas where questions can be asked. One is the local site rules.
Okay, very important, yes.
So what's involved in that as far as the candidate's concerned?
Well, they should be all the good things that the candidates are familiar with in terms of the safe operation of a model at their local site. So it'll be things like the no-fly zones, you know, where the car park is sited, where the pilot box is, any other sort of local disciplines in terms of transmitter control, etc., etc. So yes, site rules are very important, and I like to think that all examiners would ask questions regarding their local site at the time of the test, as part of the test.
And obviously if an examiner's not local to the club where the test is being done, they will have picked up on those.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's important for an examiner like today. There are several of us visiting your club, and you know, it's very important for us to have a good handle on all those good.
Yeah. Okay. Now the other thing that worries people is they could be asked questions out of the BMFA handbook.
Yes.
And that's a very big document.
It is indeed, yeah.
What are the important things for them to learn out of the handbook?
Well, basically, it's all anything that's related to the operated and model aircraft. Obviously, we're not going to ask you questions, well, I don't think it's appropriate to ask you questions on the BMFA Constitution, say for example, but if you look at the handbook, the main sections are section 8 through to 24 inclusive. So that's 8 through to 24 are the important elements that I think examiners are likely to base their other questions on.
And the reality is the vast majority of information in there is common sense.
Oh, absolutely. And you're quite often, as an examiner myself, I find myself using the phrase, just tell me what you would do normally, or just tell me what you did because I watched you do the safety, go through the safety drill or the check or whatever it was. So quite often people, as you say, they're doing these things anyway, and they don't realise that the question you've asked relates to something that's ingrained, you know, something that they do automatically, which is great.
Yeah.
It's good.
And it's important when somebody's doing a test that they do articulate the sorts of things they might do and take for granted.
Absolutely.
So that the examiner can understand that they're
in fact, I
thinking about what they're doing.
I think that's really good, and quite often I will ask candidates to talk me through what they're doing, particularly all the pre-flight and post-flight checks and things like that. And it's a very good way of actually making the candidates relax a little bit. It's that classic interview thing where you're given the opportunity to talk about yourself. So yeah, I think it's a good relaxing technique.
Brilliant. Any other advice you would give candidates?
Remember, we're here to have fun, you know, and I've been really pleased. We've had a great summer this year, really good weather, and we've had an awful lot of tests. Numbers are up. Lots of people taking club examiner tests, which is great, and I've been really pleased by the number of people that have fed back to me saying, I've had a great day. I didn't realise, you know, I was nervous about the test and I didn't need to be. So I think that's a very important message. Get out there and enjoy it, you know.
Okay, I think was one of the lessons that we got from the Achievement Scheme flying at Buckminster this year was that particularly if you're doing the B test, you do need to practice it.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I've seen very competent flyers of all disciplines that have probably taken, you know, a good day or two at least to practice the manoeuvres. Yeah, if they're not things you fly routinely, then you will have to practice them.
Yeah. And if you're having any difficulty with any of the manoeuvres, then seek advice from some of the better flyers in the club, or better still, some of your examiners.
Some of the examiners, yeah, they're not ogres. Do go and speak to them and have a chat with them. They'll be pleased with the interaction, and only too pleased, I'm sure, to talk you through if you're having any problems or whatever. So,
brilliant.
Yeah,
okay.
No, all good.
Thank you for that, Duncan.
Okay, looking forward to flying today.
One of the things Duncan did not mention was the difficulty some people have in learning the information. A technique I know some people have used is to get someone to record the questions and sample answers and then play the recording back to themselves several times in order to help learn and remember the key safety points. Also, don't forget the mnemonics Duncan and I discussed. That can also help with remembering, like the one you can use on arrival at the flying site that reminds you of the things you should be thinking about using the sweets mnemonic. S for sun, where is the sun in relation to where you will be flying? And where is the sun going to move throughout the day? Will it affect your flight patterns? What actions will you take if you accidentally fly through the sun? Should you be wearing sunglasses? W for wind. Consider the wind direction and strength. How will this affect your flights? Will you have to modify your normal takeoff and especially your landing patterns? From your local knowledge, will there be any turbulence with this wind direction and strength? The first E for eventualities. What will you do if you hear or see a full-size aeroplane or helicopter flying at low level near the field? What if the landing area is suddenly obstructed when you're on finals to land? What will you do if a nearby footpath or bridle path suddenly has walkers or horses on it? Then there's the second E for emergencies. You could have an engine cut at any part of a flight. So consider where your dead stick landings might be safely made and which ground areas you should definitely avoid. What is the protocol for your field to warn other field users if you have an emergency? T for transmitter control. Is the site pegboard in operation? Where has the pegboard been placed? Are you familiar with the system and do you understand how it works? Is it safe to turn on your transmitter? Maybe not so important from a frequency perspective in these days of 2.4 gigahertz radio, but still very relevant if you or others are still using 35 megahertz radio. S for site rules. Are there any specific site rules you should be aware of? Most importantly, where are the no-fly zones or dead airspace areas of the site? Then there is the SMART mnemonic for pre-flight and pre-takeoff checks. S for switch. Are all the switches in the correct position? For example, the engine kill switch in the off position, retract switch in the down position. If safe to do so, then switch on your transmitter. M for meter and model. Is there sufficient battery voltage or capacity showing, and is the correct model selected? A for aerial. Is it secure and properly aligned or extended? R for rate switches. Are they all in the correct positions for this model? T for trims. Are they also in the correct positions? As I've already said, an examiner is not expecting a parrot fashion answer to any of the questions they may ask. I know if I get an answer that feels it's been learnt parrot fashion, I may ask a supplementary question such as, so what does that mean in practice? Just to check that the application of the safety guidance in the real world is fully understood by the candidate. Don't be afraid to have discussions or ask questions at your club about your legal and safety obligations as a way of helping you to understand and remember the requirements. Now, one of the key issues is to make sure you have a model suitable for taking the test. The minimum weight limit for an A, B or C test is 1 kilogram. The model should also be capable of making a rise off ground takeoff and subsequent landing, so will require a suitable undercarriage. A fixed wing model should not have any sort of artificial electronic stabilisation enabled and only be in flight enabling mode for helicopter or multi-rotor models. Now, flight enabling mode is basically the electronic equivalent of a flybar on a helicopter. The aircraft should also be capable of doing the test manoeuvres. A basic trainer is perfectly suitable for an A test, but it may have some problems performing some of the manoeuvres in a B test. If the only model you have available does not meet the minimum weight, stabilisation or rise off ground requirements, then all is not lost. You will still be able to take a basic proficiency certificate test, or BPC as it's known. This is exactly the same as an A test, but allows less than 1 kilogram stabilised or hand-launched models to be used. Duncan mentioned the need to practice. Whilst an examiner is not looking for top competition level of quality of manoeuvres, you should be able to perform recognisable and reasonably positioned manoeuvres. You should discuss with the examiner before any test the appropriate positioning and alignment of the manoeuvres relative to the flying strip and the wind direction and strength on the day. An examiner will make some allowances for the weather conditions when assessing your manoeuvres. Don't forget, they're all experienced model flyers themselves, so they do understand the effects of wind and turbulence. However, it's worth ensuring you have practiced the manoeuvres in a variety of wind conditions to ensure you are capable of completing the test successfully. You also allowed a helper to ensure the safe handling of the model in the pits and to and from the flight line. If you think this is required and no other club member is available, you may ask the examiner to help. The main point about asking the examiner for help is that for the purposes of the test, you will need to assume they have little or no experience in assisting and instruct them on exactly what you would like them to do. Likewise, assume anyone in the vicinity of the model while starting up and preparing for takeoff, including the examiner and the helper, is naive to the risks associated with model aircraft, such as rotating props, rotating rotor blades, or turbine danger areas, and ensure you clearly recognise and politely deal with any hazards they may be exposing themselves to. For a first-person view extension test, you will require a competent observer, but you cannot use the examiner as your competent observer, and you should properly brief your observer before the flight with the examiner present, as the examiner will be judging the effective safety interaction between the pilot and the observer during the test. It's really important that you understand exactly what your examiner is expecting of you before you start the flight. So do not be afraid to ask. You should both feel that you fully understand what is going to happen during the test and exactly where you are going to position manoeuvres. At many clubs, other flyers will not fly whilst the test is being taken, although at some busier clubs this is not always possible. Remember, whilst you are flying, to make all the usual communication calls as if others are flying. Especially don't forget opposite direction circuits or manoeuvres that can be an obstruction to other flyers, such as the figure of 8, or when you're entering or leaving the live flying strip. If others are actually flying, or the examiner responds to your call as if they are flying a model, listen to the response and act appropriately. Sometimes a manoeuvre will not quite go as planned, and most examiners will give you an opportunity to fly that manoeuvre again. The examiner will take account of weather conditions, your nerves, etc. in this judgment, but they will not allow you multiple attempts until you get it right. And if they have to ask you for more than a couple of the manoeuvres to be repeated, they're getting close to the point of failing you. After the flight, the examiner will ask you 5 mandatory questions and then a minimum of 5 supplementary questions for an A test or 8 supplementary questions for a B test. Also, if you had to repeat a couple of the manoeuvres, the examiner may ask you why you think things went astray. If you then show a good understanding of why and what you should have done to correct it, this will reassure the examiner that you have a good understanding of where you went wrong and how to do it better next time. It is really important to remember that most examiners really want you to pass, so we'll be doing everything they can to make the process as simple and stress-free as possible for you. However, for the scheme to be of any value, you will have needed to prepare and have practiced to be able to clearly demonstrate you're competent, capable and responsible in the way you operate your model aircraft. A couple of final points. Don't forget to demonstrate to the examiner that your model's failsafe is correctly set during pre-flight checks. And to give yourself the best possible chance in the flying part of the test, you need to have carefully trimmed your model and ensure the centre of gravity is correct. And that's especially important if you're using different weight batteries in an electric model. And let the examiner see and know that you have previously checked all this during your pre-flight range and model fit for flight checks. If you've found this introductory video of some help in getting started on your journey to obtaining a BMFA Achievement Scheme certificate, we are planning on producing additional videos on the specific flying part of the various tests over the next few years, starting with the fixed wing A test. So keep your eyes open on the Achievement Scheme website for publication of these videos. So if you've been thinking about taking a test, why not set yourself the challenge of achieving it this year? The members of the ASRC would like to wish you all good luck with your endeavour, and I for one hope you have fun doing it. Safe flying,